today as we gather for the ways in which we might serve and bring about possibilities that might not yet exist, but that you're calling us to. God, grant us wisdom, grant us courage to do the good work that you have for us to do. All this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thanks, Lance. My name's Eric Veman. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee here at First United Methodist Church of Houston. And before we got into the presentation from the folks from Texas Methodist Foundation who are going to talk about planned giving and legacy giving, I wanted to just mention a couple of things about First Methodist Houston. We've got two primary recipients that this sort of giving could benefit, and you get to make the choice as to which one you want. One is the church itself, First Methodist Houston. If you make a gift to the church, it's treated differently as to how the funds are used than if you make a gift to our own foundation. We do have our own foundation created back in the late 50s. Its official name is First Methodist Church of Houston Foundation. You might notice there's no United in there, and that's because the Methodist Church had not united in 1957 or 8 when this was done. So the official name of the church, even though we brand it as First Methodist Houston, is still First United Methodist Church of Houston. The name of our foundation is First Methodist Church of Houston Foundation. Now, if you make a gift to the foundation, it's like an endowment gift because the foundation itself is a form of endowment. What does that mean? The actual gift amount is not immediately used or available to be expended on the church's operations and missions, but the income it generates from that point forward is available to be distributed from the foundation to support the church's operations. Technically, the way the foundation works right now, instead of focusing on income, interest, dividends, or whatever, that the distribution policy of the foundation is that it distributes 5% of the value of its investment portfolio, which is currently around cash and marketable securities, currently around $8.7 million. So roughly 5% of that amount comes out every year to support operations of the church. So one recipient for this sort of planned bigger giving, not your normal regular tithes, but over and above, is the foundation. The other option is the church itself. And what happens under the Book of Discipline is transfers that are made when a person dies, a testamentary transfer, which was referred to as a bequest, comes into the trustee funds. The church has a set of trustees that are charged with dealing with our buildings and stuff, and the other things they do is they administer the funds that come through bequests. And what the trustees do typically with those funds is they put them in the bank and use them on bigger projects, like a roof or an HVAC repair or something like that. Can be used for other purposes, but that's what they're used for. A gift directly to the church is not an endowment gift. It's a gift that can be spent in its entirety, and as a member of your finance committee for several years, having that sort of flexibility is very helpful in downtimes, but having the sort of permanent, perpetual endowment gifts are going to be helpful as well. So it's up to the person that's making the giving to decide which of those recipients they want to do, whether it's the foundation, the church's foundation, or whether it's the church itself. If you have any questions about that, feel free to ask me or any other person on the finance committee later. At this point, I'm going to probably pop back in as we hear from Justin and Pamela, but I'm going to turn it over to them to make the presentation about philanthropy and giving.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Justin Gould. I'm with the Texas Methodist Foundation, and my colleague Pamela is here, and we are thrilled to be with you today. Thank you for the invitation, particularly to Eric, Lance, and Ann, who helped kind of lead the charge to get us all gathered. So I've been at Texas Methodist Foundation about 10 years. I was born and raised here in Houston, so I live in Austin now, but it's wonderful coming home every now and again. So grew up in northwest part of town. I have a wife and 2 kids, so just a little bit about me, and I graduated from Southwestern in Georgetown. My kids are both going to be starting high school and finishing high school next year, so if that gives you some sense of the stage of life I'm in, all prayers are welcome. So thank you. So yes, Eric kind of introduced, we're here to just give you what we hope is an opportunity to think differently about your assets and how you might gift from your assets to support the ministries of First Methodist Houston. And so I want to give Pamela a little chance to introduce herself before we jump in. But again, thank you to all for being with us today, and I look forward to sharing some things with you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pamela Gray, the Director of Philanthropy at Texas Methodist Foundation. I have been with the foundation since September 5th, so I am very new. And my connection to Houston is I was Director of Gift Planning at Rice University. I've also worked for many nonprofits. I've been doing this for about 30 years and have seen all sorts of iterations of plans, and wonderful things come to fruition from those plans. And I am married with a 5-year-old, so I need double the prayers Justin has. And I'm so very, very glad to be here with you today. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Before we jump into the philanthropic pieces of the presentation, I just want to offer a little bit of an overview on Texas Methodist Foundation for those who aren't familiar with us. We've been around since we were founded in the 1930s. So the bishop and a few lay leaders at the time committed to funding a Wesleyan presence in Texas. It was that direct and that simple. They created a kind of a vision statement at the time, a mission statement, to empower the church in the achievement of its God-appointed missions, and that is still our mission today. So everything that we do at TMF is in support of local congregations. At TMF, we serve all of Texas and New Mexico, so we have a pretty wide geography, and we also have a breadth of churches and members that we serve. So in addition to the philanthropic pieces that we do, one of our core service areas is a lender. So we make loans to churches, and those loans are funded by investments in our impact notes. And so our impact notes function much like CDs for individuals and congregations. So kind of very quickly, you can invest in a variable rate note or 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-year fixed rate notes. Those investments are available to both individuals and organizations. Any nonprofit can participate in those. So from that capital is what allows us to help churches grow across both states. So that's a core ministry of ours. Additionally, about 20 years ago, we began investing in clergy leadership development. And so we have a part of our organization is called the Learning and Innovation area, and we work with 300 to 400 clergy every year. Lance has been a participant in some of our cohort learning experiences, and ideally, we're bringing peers together who are kind of serving and leading in a similar context so that they have a facilitated opportunity to kind of live into their own potential and ultimately serve that church and community. And so really, really big, important piece. One of the other areas that we do, so over the 80 plus years that we've been around, we've been fortunate to partner with a number of donors. So we administer north of 600 plus individual endowment funds. Some of those endowment funds have directions established by the donor that there's named beneficiaries, so a donor might suggest that the income from that endowment go directly to First Methodist Houston. Other donors have said, we don't know what the church will need in 100 years. We're going to trust TMF to make good decisions about our resources. And in the cases where those endowments are structured, we have a grants ministry. So each year, we make grants to churches and nonprofits across Texas and New Mexico, anywhere between probably $2 and $3 million. And the reason it ranges is that the underlying value of those endowment assets ebbs and flows with the markets, like anything. And so we try to. There are certain guidelines that we must adhere to as a a trustee of those funds. And so we have some guidance about how much we can spend, and that informs what our available spending is for those churches and nonprofits on an annual basis. But that's a little bit about who we are. We really are focused on serving the local church, and that's why we're here today. So appreciate your time and attention. One of the things that Eric said that I want to highlight is we're here to help you think about what's most important to you and to offer some ways that you might think about your giving. Donor designation and ministry and alignment of vision in ministry is what this is all about. So whether it's supporting the church foundation or supporting the church outright, this is all about putting information in your hands so that you can begin to think about what's most important to you. So today's conversation, this is just a little bit of an agenda. I'm going to start with kind of a macro level view of what's happening in philanthropy in the United States. I think it's important to understand the context in which philanthropy happens. It's changing. I'll start there and leave it until we get into some of the slides. Legislation also can impact our philanthropy. And so we will not get into the weeds on this, I promise, but more to highlight that things change. And that as those changes occur, it's helpful for donors to understand what their options are. And so we'll talk about that. Then we'll get into kind of what to give, how to give it, and kind of some impact and why endowments are important. So thank you. So we're going to start with, in our world, in the fundraising world, there's an annual report provided by Giving USA. And it basically does the most comprehensive study of philanthropy in the United States each and every year. And so what we want to highlight here is that in 2022, there was almost $500 billion donated by individuals across the country. And that's an incredible number. That is a little bit down, though, from the two prior years, which set records. And if you go back to 21 and 20, the world was in a different place. But the generosity of people in America shone through. It was absolutely amazing. And so part of this is what we want to point out, and why we're here today, is that 64% of that $500 billion came from individuals. The truth of the matter is that bequests are funded by individuals also. So you add another 9%. And then foundations, people are familiar, you understand that families create family foundations. So individuals are by far and away the largest source of charitable giving in the country. Thank you. So one of the things that you all will understand and probably experience is that religion is still far and away the biggest recipient of charitable giving in our country. It has declined in line with some of the trends that we've seen in institutional religion, but it's still far and away the largest area of giving for our organizations. I like sharing this slide because, and this does not include churches. This is only nonprofits. So every year, there's about a 3% increase in the number of 501c3s that operate in our country. You know what they're doing? They're asking people for money. And some of them do an exceptional job of it. So this is to highlight that the church really does actually have some competition for charitable dollars. And that part of what we hope to help you as a church do is articulate your story of impact. That is what's going to resonate with donors. The lifelong relationship is absolutely critical, but increasingly younger audiences, Gen X, Gen Y, they want to understand what the impact of their charitable dollars is going towards. And so some of the nonprofits have done a particularly good job of articulating that story of impact. Churches have every chance to be competitive in that space, and that's core, right? So we want to help churches have the chance to compete. I mentioned legislation. So what I just want you to look at is that the first bullet here is 2017. And since that time, there have been 4 kind of core pieces of legislation. It's not necessarily important that you understand the ins and outs of each of those pieces of legislation from this presentation, but that's a pretty short period of time where there's a lot of change in law that that informs donors and their advisors about what they can give, how they can give it, and when they can give it. And so, a couple things I want to highlight. I shared this with Eric a little bit earlier. It doesn't necessarily impact it impacts maybe 1% of our population, if that. But the estate laws that were passed in 2017 will actually sunset at the end of 2025 and revert back to the 2017 numbers. So that could impact a small percentage of people. But the bigger one that I really want to highlight is that Secure 2.0 Act that offered legislation around qualified charitable distributions. And I'm just going to mention that right now. We'll get into detail a little bit later about what a qualified charitable distribution is. But that's an incredible opportunity, particularly for churches, to be inviting folks to consider. And kind of the last piece of the landscape of philanthropy today. There was a New York Times article in May of last year, and it was centered around the transfer of wealth that's happening in our country. And in that article, and the range is pretty wide, but it's so vast that we have to highlight this. The article cited that there will be between $45 and $85 trillion of wealth transferred in the next couple of decades. We want the church to be part of that conversation with families. And if you're not engaging now, you're going to miss some opportunities, and we don't want that to happen. So there's an incredible silent gen, baby boomer, Gen X are all in different stages, and the church needs to be relevant and open to what that might look like from a philanthropic perspective as we move forward, particularly for the foundation and for the church itself. One last thing on that last one. Today's is about planned giving and legacy giving, but the truth is some of the tools we're going to talk about offer ways to make gifts today, and those should not be shunned. We always want to invite current gifts. That can move the needle. And so one of my very favorite board members this is his quote, and he stands by it all the time. He said, "I'm giving while I'm living, so I'm knowing where it's going." And he just wants to experience the impact of his charity and equip the nonprofits and churches that he loves and supports to be relevant. So I'm going to hand it to Pamela for the next few things. And I should have started. Forgive me. John Esquivel is here. Many of you know John. John is our chair-elect at Texas Methodist Foundation and will be leading us in a very instrumental period of time in the coming years. And John, thank you for being here. John also currently chairs our grants committee, which I referenced earlier. From those endowments where we have some variance, John helps lead the committee of the board that makes the ultimate decisions about that. So John, thank you for being here, and we're really glad you showed up. Thank you.
Great, thank you. You got it? Yeah, I got it. So what to give? Of course, this is cash and appreciated securities, assets such as real estate, just art, all of the above. And, those are things that we give, but we also give of our time and our, that treasure. And we also give our testimony and our stories. And those stories are really important, especially if you've done something and you share that, because then others can sort of join you and see how they can also do those types of gifts. And when we get into asset giving, that's when you need those sort of planned gift tools, those gift planning tools, such as easy gifts, so giving through your will or your living trust, depending on your advisor and your situation, you would use one of these two tools to complete plans for the future. Take care of your family, take care of those organizations in your community that really mean the most to you, like your church. The other things are those easy gifts, beneficiary designations. Make sure you've got beneficiaries on all of your accounts. I talked with a couple earlier this week, and they were like, well, we're on each other's accounts. And I said, but what if you're in the car at the same time and something happens? And they were like, oh, we're going to do that tomorrow. So just some of those things we don't think about. And sometimes our financial institutions don't remind us either that we can do that. So you can put beneficiary designations on your bank accounts, your retirement plans, life insurance. All of those types of things are great opportunities to give to charity. And depending on the tax implications, and Justin, jump in here if you want to say something. Depending on the tax implications, some of these gifts could be better suited for if you're thinking about putting charity in your plans, like an IRA, might be a percentage of that, or contingency in a beneficiary designation might have better tax implications if it goes to charity rather than going to family. So maybe if you have a house, leave that to a family member, that would be better tax situation. So always ask those questions of your advisors when you are thinking about those types of gifts. And then qualified charitable distributions. How many of you have heard about qualified charitable distributions, the IRA rollover gift, all of that? So if you're 70 and a half, you can give anywhere up to $100,000 a year. Doesn't have to be part of your qualified distribution. You can give up to $100,000, even if that's over above your distribution, to a qualified charity as a gift, as long as it transfers directly from the IRA provider to the charity in question. So that's very important. If the check comes to you and you deliver it, you're going to have the tax implications of taking that out of your IRA.
Depending on the IRA sponsor, those gifts can take a little time to process. So this is not something you want to leave towards the end of the year. If your family unit is an end of year giving family unit, I really encourage you to take some time, probably at the beginning of the year or at least during the summer, to think about how that QCD, the timing of that qualified charitable distribution, because our experience is it's a vast, the timeline is. It can be a little frustrating to be blunt, but in order for you to plan well and make sure that gift happens in the right way so that it's excluded from your income, time is your best friend.
Yeah. And as we know, more and more of individuals' assets are now being held in their retirement plans, especially with a lot of the 403Bs and 401Ks and everything. But if you're going to transfer a qualified charitable distribution, it has to come from an IRA. So you have to roll that 403B or that retirement plan into an IRA before you can do that, and you have to be 70 and a half. So gifts by will or living trust, this really represents about 70 to 75% of all charitable planned gifts that come through bequests. It's really interesting. I did some research a couple of years ago during COVID, and to see that it used to be about 54 to 55% of everybody nationally would actually complete a plan, whether that be a living trust or bequest. That's actually shrinking. Less and less individuals are taking that time to plan their estate. Even though younger people in their 40s are starting to do that, it's really interesting to me that it's less and less rather than, everybody really planning. You'd think that that scale would have changed. So the types of bequests. So there's, of course, a general bequest. I bequeath $10,000 to First Methodist, okay? There's a percentage bequest, 5%, 10%. Then there's also that contingent, that sort of, the one that's like, I've taken care of everyone, but 100% of what's left I'd like to give to First Methodist. So you could do those kinds of things. So that's the different types of bequests. That residuary is always interesting because I swear everybody does not know everything that they have when it comes down to it. It's, doing this for 30 years, you see a lot of really interesting things. Living trust assets to not go through probate, which provides privacy for the individual and their heirs, and it is revocable. So, when you think about your estate, you can do that living trust or the bequest. Bequest has to go through probate. Yes, go ahead. You're gonna.
Okay, take that one. Back to the wills and the gifts by will and gifts by living trust. In our experience, this is really important. You must steward, as leaders in your church, you want to steward that gift all the way through one's lifetime. People make really important decisions and sometimes strange decisions as they reach the end of their life. And so for the church to be a part of that story from the time a member joins through their lifetime is really, really important. So just because someone tells you they have included you in their plans, that's the beginning of your work. And from a church perspective, as donors, you all want to be thinking about, is the church still honoring my intentions? Does the church know? As donors, I encourage you to share what your plans are so that the church understands and can actually implement the gift in the way that you want it implemented. So a quick story about Joanne Ranton. Joanne is a widow from Waxahachie, sharp as a tack. She is super fun. But Joanne has lost her husband and 2 children, and is honoring each member of her family through her endowment fund, her testamentary endowment fund that she actually is going to set up at TMF for the benefit of Waxahachie First. And so her son was an organist, so there's a component of her plan that will support music ministry at Waxahachie, not necessarily the organ, but music ministry broadly. There's operating support. So she has created an endowment fund through her will and TMF that actually accomplishes any number of things, scholarship funds for high school students from Waxahachie First who are attending college, and also high school students at Waxahachie attending college. So anyways, the limitations on what you can give through your will are only you establish those through the relationship you have. And so part of this is a story to say, as you begin to articulate your vision for your philanthropy, and you want that named in your estate plan, possibly through a will or living trust, please engage the beneficiary, the church foundation, or the church, and have a conversation about whether or not that plan is in alignment with what they hope they can do with it. So, Eric?
Yeah, I was going to jump in with 2 quick comments here. My day job for the last 42 years is I've been an estate planning wills and trust attorney. So I think in Texas, the choice of whether you do something in a will or if you do it in a living trust, I'm agnostic about it. We have clients that go one way or the other way. In other states, probate is mean and nasty. In Texas, it's very streamlined, and very little information other than what the will says is revealed to anyone. So I wouldn't worry about the choice between will and living trust. Go with what your advisor says or what you're comfortable with. And the other thing is, while these wonderful people here from TMF could take your money and measure work an endowment fund for our church, we would prefer your gifts actually go to our church if that's what you want to do, an endowment type of gift. Now, there are some things they're going to talk about here in the near future, charitable gift annuities, charitable remainder trust, things where we need their intervention and help in order for you to do those sort of things for First Methodist Houston. If you just want to make an endowment gift for the church, you've got a ready-made way to do that, and that's make the gift to our foundation.
That's right. Thank you. Let's see.
All right. Yeah, I used to have a colleague of mine, and he'd always say, don't forget that, but when somebody leaves you in their estate plan, they have now elevated you to, a 50-year marriage or above. So you are family, and that really takes into thinking about how that relationship should be, and it should be a give and take, and it should be that conversation as well. I just wanted to add that. But he always used to go through the levels of donor development and talking with people, and he would relate that to the family relationship, which I thought was really cool. So gifts of beneficiary designations, we've really talked about your IRA, other retirement plans, commercial annuity funds, life insurance and bank accounts. So we sort of covered that a little bit already. So qualified charitable distribution, the QCD, the IRA rollover provision, this, you just need to remember that if it goes directly to the charity, it is excluded from your income. And it's for individuals 70 and a half and older. They did pass a provision this year for the QCD limit to increase to $105,000, and that's for a one-time donation. And then we also have charitable remainder unit trust, charitable remainder annuity trust, and charitable trusts really are for those situations where you have a large sum of money, a lot of appreciated securities, you want to sell a business within a trust. You want to take that large asset and turn it into lifetime payments and income for yourself, loved ones, and then it would then go to charity. Whatever's left would go to the charities of your choice. And then Justin was going to tell us a little bit about the King family, one of the donors at TMF.
So the King family is from Amarillo, and Charles King is a former board member at TMF and an estate attorney like Eric. I don't know if you know Charles. Yeah, I bet you do. It can be a small world. But Charles does all of his giving and their family's giving through their qualified charitable distribution. Polk Street is their church in Amarillo. So in addition to Polk Street, they've funded things like UMCOR. There's a tug on both he and Jan's heart for disaster response. And so UMCOR has been a big part of their charitable giving, but all of that happens through their qualified charitable distribution. And in conversation, it is all about excluding that from income. And so depending on one scenario, that can have different implications. But from a very high level perspective, having that required minimum distribution not hitting your adjusted gross income in a particular year or a couple of years can have other implications for your financial situation. So great family, incredibly generous, and just, you know, it's going to be up to each family to kind of understand where they are, what they want to accomplish, and then that's where Pamela and I can be part of the conversation if you're inclined to help you think, how does that happen? So.
And specifically for the qualified charitable distribution, depending on the amount of your distribution, it can put you into a different tax bracket. It can affect your Medicare percentage. So those are things that you need to always kind of be aware of. So charitable gift annuities. So we have the availability at TMF to do what's called a charitable gift annuity. And that is a simple contract between the person giving the money into the charitable gift annuity and TMF to then support a charity of their choice. It provides lifetime payments. A percent of that is going to be part of your is going to be the interest, and then part of it actually is going to be the corpus. The premise being that at least 50% will go to the charity at the time of the charitable gift annuities, at the time the donor or the second person in the charitable gift annuity passes away. They pay you income for life. They're great. What I have seen for charitable gift annuities, and I can tell you a little bit about a gentleman, he lived to be 106. So he attributed being so with us for such a long time to the fact that he did 8 charitable gift annuities. And he did them specifically to meet goals in their retirement. So monthly, I needed X amount to pay for our medications. I needed to pay for our, rent or whatever that looked like. So he sort of laddered those as a planning tool. So that's just an example. Here you can see we've got immediate charitable gift annuities. So those are ones that you fund, and your payments will then start based on the contract that you sign. The deferred charitable gift annuity, which is a great way to maybe ladder some income into your into the time between you taking your Social Security and retirement. Sort of there's a bridge there, and you can defer those for as many years as you would like. Start them when you think you'll need them based on your personal situation. Did you want to say something?
Just real quick. So just maybe talk about, if you would, what you can use to fund a charitable gift annuity.
Okay.
And then.
Okay, so to fund a charitable gift annuity, of course, you can use cash, appreciated securities. A lot of people use CDs that are kind of sitting there that might not be getting the same amount of interest, and sort of being able to use that in their retirement. And then the other one is a flexible gift annuity. I've done flexible annuities where grandparents have paid out during their grandchildren's college, 5 years of college, and then it would come to the charity of their choice or charities. So Justin is gonna add a couple more.
I'm going to just jump in.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think can be really attractive for donors regarding the charitable gift annuities, you actually can use it to fund someone else's income. So say I'm me, and I needed to support my parents at later stages in their life. I could create a charitable gift annuity with TMF. The payments go to my parents for their lifetimes, and at the end, the income would come to First Methodist Houston. So we see this actually, one of the real heartwarming ways this gets articulated is in assisted living, where someone becomes aware of a particular need that someone in an assisted living facility might have from a financial perspective. They have the resources to help supplement that person's income, and they can create a charitable gift annuity for the benefit of someone else. So it doesn't just, the point here is that it doesn't have to just be for you and or your spouse. You can think about these in creative ways that also ultimately provide a gift to the church.
Yep, and that's brother, sister. I had someone do it for his 4 sisters. I had someone do it for their adult child who was having health difficulties, and they were worried about that as well. And they did it, and another lady, she did it for one of her grandchildren to start paying out when they turned, because they thought that they didn't handle money very well and that they were going to need it for their retirement. So all those opportunities are there with a gift annuity. It's in the fact that it's a simple contract, really, really is attractive. It's not like a charitable trust where you have to go through, that sort of legal piece as well. Justin, you want to talk about the Newsmans?
Jack and Carol. So in 2014, Texas Methodist Foundation actually aligned with the New Mexico Methodist Foundation, and Jack was a board member at the New Mexico Methodist Foundation. And so Jack and Carol have created a charitable gift annuity. Their son is a chef and leads the food ministry at their local church in Albuquerque. So they have created a charitable gift annuity for themselves to support the food ministry of St. John's in Albuquerque upon their death, so that there continue to be resources for their son who has some special needs, but is leading that really critical ministry in Albuquerque. So there are ways to tie family and philanthropy, and that's what we just want to give you some examples of how that might happen.
So charitable remainder trusts, it's more gifts that, of course, pay income to yourself. They are more complex. They need to be drafted by a qualified advisor. A unitrust, of course, creates payments that are the same each year. That other way around. Annuity trust.
Annuity trust does the same each year.
Yeah, annuity trust does the same each year. Sorry, guys. And then the UTA trust, which then will grow with inflation. Yes, I know what I'm talking about. I do. I promise. The balance in the trust then goes to charities of your choice at the end of that trust term. And like I said, it can be very flexible. It can pay out for family members. More than one family member, could be 4 sisters, brothers, parents, whatever that looks like. It's a very flexible vehicle, but to fund it, most people fund trusts with more than a 6-figure amount, whereas a charitable gift annuity can be funded with 10, 25, 50, with a lot smaller amounts as well. And then plus, you are eligible for an immediate partial income tax deduction as well.
And I was going to say, Pamela, they can be very flexible.
Depending on how they're written.
But there's a rule that says that the value of the charitable remainder interest has to be at least 10% of the contribution. And when interest rates were low recently, it made it very hard to create some charitable remainder trusts that qualified for that 10% rule, because you also have to pay out at least 5% per year. And those things intersected in a way that made them inflexible, worked well for old people, didn't work well for young people, and certainly didn't work very well if you wanted to stack 2 or 3 beneficiaries. Now that interest rates have gone up, they're a little more flexible than they were before. But as Pamela said, you don't do these with just a few $1,000s, and really you don't do it even though their limit is $100,000. This is a sort of a big jump. But it's much more flexible in that you can decide within that requirement that it has to pay out at least 5% per year how big you want the charitable deduction to be. Where in the charitable gift annuity, it's sort of predetermined that whatever you give them, roughly half of it measured at the front end is going to the charity. Might not be that the charity gets it for several years, but that's the division at the front end. The division at the front end in the charitable trust can be as little as 10% to charity, 90% back to the family members that are doing it. It is a great way if you want to avoid capital gains taxes on assets that are you want to pass to charity anyway, and you're looking for a way to bump up your current rate of return, that a charitable remainder trust is a very powerful vehicle then. It doesn't eliminate that tax on the capital gain. It defers it, though, and that means the investment pool is going to be much bigger. So it's a very powerful tool for bigger gifts. The charitable gift annuity is sort of the same thing that you can do with a smaller amount, but it is a 50. You've got to be willing to say, I'm prepared to give 50% to my church. And if you are, that's essentially what you're doing. It's just we get it a little bit down the road, and TMF manages it for us.
Right. And with charitable trusts, what I've seen as well is individuals who are selling their business within a trust, they'll do a percentage of the business within the charitable trust to help them with tax issues as well, or real estate. Yes, if you do it early enough. And real estate with where they'll sell the real estate within the trust, and that way it'll take care of that gain on the house as well.
Yeah, I think you just named the other piece, that trusts can receive a much wider array of assets than a charitable gift annuity. So depending on the scale of the size of that asset, what your goals are, if it's cash and appreciated securities, start with a gift annuity. Think about that. If it's beyond that, then the conversation might shift to how a trust might support your goals.
Yeah. A charitable lead trust. A charitable lead trust actually pays out to the charity. You fund it with appreciated assets, similar to other charitable remainder trust, but then it pays out to the actual charity for a period of years and then goes back to the either family members or individuals that funded the trust at the end of that period. So it's sort of on the front end. I've only done 2 of these, and they were in the 90s that I've worked on.
Very common
not
for
very
a lot
common.
of practical reasons. And in an environment where the interest rates have risen the last 18 months, they're even a little more challenging. So worth mentioning because you just don't know, but not something we'd probably lead with in terms of, oh, have you thought about the trust? Because they're not for everybody, but
Yeah.
certainly an opportunity. Donor advised funds. So I'm happy to take this one. Donor advised funds, for those who aren't familiar, they're incredible giving tools. They can be a substitute for a family foundation on a number of levels. TMF does sponsor donor advised funds. I think about it as a philanthropic giving, just as a charitable giving account. The donor, you can make a gift. The gift would come to TMF. You then choose how those funds are invested. You can invest them in cash, keep it very liquid. You could invest them in the market, so there's some appreciation over time. You then simply make recommendations to TMF to distribute those dollars when you're ready. So, for example, you fund a donor advised fund. You then send an email the next day if you want, or we would want written. You can go online or do it via email, and you would recommend a grant from that giving account to the endowment fund at First Methodist Houston. You can send it to the YMCA or the Y. You could send it to the United Way. Any 501c3 can be the beneficiary of a grant from your donor advised fund. There's no 990s filed. So if you are a family that has thought about a family foundation, there's no investment. The investment fee structure is going to look a little different on a donor advised fund than it would at a family foundation. And you don't have to worry about the management of the assets because TMF would be doing that. But there's 2 families up here that I want to highlight, the Osleys and the Snyders. Osleys they make an addition to their donor advised fund each and every year. First Austin is an incredible beneficiary of that donor advised fund, as are UT, Texas Tech, and about 5 or 6 other nonprofits in the Austin area. So think about this as you can make one gift and then make the distributions, your grants and your charitable gifts to the charities of your choice over a period of time. There is no time horizon. There's not a 5% spend rate like you would find on a foundation. They're incredibly, incredibly flexible giving tools. And so then the Snyders, the Snyder family the mother and father in the Snyder family created a family foundation. It had a couple $1 million in assets under management. And at the death of the mother and father, the new trustees of that family foundation were the 4 siblings who all lived in different parts of the country, so had very different local interests. And rather than continuing with the family foundation, they converted that charitable asset into a donor advised fund, and each sibling then had their own donor advised fund, so they didn't have to basically negotiate with their siblings each and every time for the authority to make a grant. So incredibly flexible. The other really cool thing that I forgot to mention on the Osleys and why they're there, it's not appreciated securities. The Osleys have included their children in their planning process. So their children are successor advisors on their donor advised fund. So at the death of Tom and Robbie, their 4 children then have the opportunity to make grants from their family fund. So that legacy, it's that legacy connection that is incredibly powerful. We even have a few donor advised fund holders who engage their grandchildren in the giving process. So each Christmas, one of our donor advised fund holders goes to their grandchildren and says, "What charities do you love?" And they make a pitch to grandma. And grandma then makes a recommendation for a grant to First Houston or the other charities of choice. So you have the other really flexible thing on donor advised funds, they can receive a number of different assets to fund that account. So really, really interesting tool from a philanthropic perspective. Eric, any thoughts on donor-advised funds? Because there's a lot of conversation around donor-advised funds, but I think they're really wonderful when used in the right way.
Yeah, they're very flexible tools right now. I think you'd mentioned before legislative possibilities. One of the legislative possibilities is they might limit some of the freedom you get with donor-advised funds right now, because they're being, at least based on policymakers in Washington, being misused some, because they're touted as ways to create a private foundation-like vehicle, but avoid the 5% mandatory payout rule that applies to any private foundation. Because technically, once the money hits TMF, you could say, I'm never going to make a distribution out of my donor-advised fund. It's just going to grow and grow and grow, and I can point to it and say, look how big it is, but it wouldn't have benefited any charity at that point at all. Now, most donor-advised fund sponsors like TMF can show that their actual payout is far in excess of 5% per year, because most people that use the donor-advised funds don't use it to park assets. They just use it as a temporary way station before they actually distribute assets. We're not here to try to convince you to create a donor-advised fund, and there are various other places to do it. Fidelity does them. There's the Greater Houston Community Foundation. There's lots of places to do it. If you happen to have one, though, we'd love to have the money come from your donor-advised fund to First Methodist Houston. And if you're interested in doing something like that, you have to have been the sort of people that were contemplating a private foundation or really want to get on a regular giving program but haven't decided yet who the ultimate recipients are. So you've got a temporary way station. I'm not sure it fits to us, but if you're interested, clearly TMF is here to help you out with one.
Appreciate it. Yeah, again, we're trying to share the different ways people can give, and between the life income gifts, bequests, and donor-advised funds, the idea is to give you guys some options about what works best for you.
And then we've talked a lot about endowments, and endowments, like the endowment here at First, are ways that you can have a permanent fund. It's that save for the future. It's that income generating fund that tends to be budget relieving and budget supporting for organizations. And at TMF, we do have the availability to do endowments for individuals and organizations. So did you want to add anything to that?
You know, Eric kind of started that the foundation is functioning as endowment, and it exists in perpetuity, and that's what we're trying to encourage, is that as members of First Houston, we want you to be thinking about the ways that foundation can support First Houston and the ministries that will be really critical, not only today, but 50 and 100 years from now. It's an incredible gift to give to endowment, because it really demonstrates your trust and love for that organization. And one of the things that I just think is worth noting is that oftentimes when someone decides to include a charity, a church in their estate planning process, their annual support actually increases. As you've mentioned, you become part of the family. And so to the degree that you all are thinking about gifts to the endowment here at First Houston, know that it's loved and appreciated, because it gives opportunity for ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we just included some resources, some books that we have read and look at in our own work, as well as I'm on the board for the Charitable Gift Planners of Austin, and I've participated as a speaker here for the Houston organization as well, and on the national level. Giving USA is where we got a lot of our first slides. And then there's like a I Can Talk, Spirituality of Fundraising by Henry Nouwen. I actually am just going through another series of trainings and videos around that, and it's really, it's just really profound, and it really talks about how generosity and how this work and what we're doing and philanthropy is just part of that ministry, that it's really a calling. And then
We don't need to.
we're not gonna, we have a video on our website. I don't know if you all have seen it, but there is some great work being done, and we've got some nice videos and things. So if you ever want to visit our website, it kind of talks a lot, and the videos inform some of our grants that we support as well.
Couple closing thoughts. Thank you for coming today. One of the ways we hope this is not a one and done conversation for you all. And so TMF communicates around planned giving. It's not going to overwhelm your inbox or your mailbox. We do 2 planned giving newsletters a year, and they're just different donor stories about some of the vehicles we talked about today. And then we do 6 emails. So 8 pieces of communication a year. We'd love to communicate with you so that you can constantly be thinking about how you might support either the outright operations of First Houston or the foundation. And there's no obligation from TMS perspective, so we don't work on commission. This is our ministry. We're here to answer your questions, your calls. We want to encourage you to talk to your advisors. Open discussion, putting your team together for your philanthropic planning is really, really important. Don't do this in isolation if you can afford to. Be thinking holistically about that charitable giving and who might be part of your conversation. But we're here to answer your questions, and we're just grateful for you all being here and welcoming us in this Sunday. And I know it's a beautiful day outside, and people are probably anxious to enjoy that weather. But thank you for being with us. Pamela, any final thoughts? Or Eric? John, any final comments? No? Okay.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
And if anyone does have a question for me, or, I think we're going to shut down the live stream now and officially call this over. But if you do have a question you'd like answered before you leave that might be able to address, I'll stick around for a little while. And I'm not going to make the same commitment for these folks because they have places to be. And we thank both Pamela and Justin for coming and doing this very much. Thank you much.